Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Debunked here on INX Prime. After much coverage of local politics, in line with the local government, or rather the national elections that took place here locally in South Africa, recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've been focusing on some important international issues. The one has been the elections in the US, and we spoke extensively about that. In the last program, we spoke about the riots and the issue with the rise of Islamophobia and immigration-related matters. And this week, we're focusing on the situation in Sudan. Now, unfortunately, the war rages on. It's become the worst humanitarian crisis. It's compromising health as the warring parties continue to target hospitals in certain regions of Sudan. It's over a year now since April 2023, where you've got the Sudanese Army under the country's de facto ruler Abdel Burhan, and the paramilitary rapid support forces led by his deputy Mohammed Hamdan Daglo. There's a risk of famine. Half of the country's population is facing crisis levels of hunger. International mediators are engaged in talks in Geneva trying to bring the war to an end. However, there's differing views in terms of how optimistic one can be. The stats are horrifying, right? So more than 10 million people displaced. This has triggered a public health disaster. The World Health Organization said a cholera outbreak has killed at least 316 people. Doctors Without Borders are saying they're working to deliver healthcare in the midst of the war by supporting public hospitals and the like. The actual number of victims since April last year is not really known. So joining us to discuss the situation in the Sudan, we have Dr. Abdel Karem El Goni. He's an activist. He's also with the Sedara Institute here in South Africa. Dr. Abdel Karem, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Debunked.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm really very happy that you are looking at Sudan issues.
Well, let me start off on a more general note and ask you to elaborate on some of what I've touched on in my introduction. What is the situation like in Sudan currently?
Sudan, my brother, is a very peaceful country, and the Sudanese are very peaceful people. But we had a military government that was ruling Sudan for 30 years, and then there was a revolution in 2018 that deposed the ruler of that regime, which is Omar al-Bashir. And we were so lucky that we have a civilian government that took Sudan out, brought Sudan into the international community, and things were going very fine, until the previous rulers of Sudan decided to come back to power using the army. And then when tried that, there is another branch of the army called the Rapid Support Forces. The Rapid Support Forces was established by a law in 2017, made an official army, and Rapid Support Forces said, no, we wanted the civilian government to continue. And because of this, almost all Sudanese think the war started because of this. And people thought it will be a 2 weeks problem, as the army was very strong. And the army general said, give us 2 weeks, those rebels will be taken off the street. But now it is more than 1.5 years. And problems are adding to problems, and problems are adding to problems. Until now, the international community is coming in trying to bring the two fighting parties together. And we, in between the two, we are like the grass that is suffering because two big giants are fighting each other.
So does the former ruler Omar al-Bashir have a hand in the current conflict? Where is he currently? How much of influence does he still have?
People think he has a hand in this issue because while he was in jail during the civilian rule, people were going in and out and discussing not only with him but with his other generals who have been in prison with him. And all these people are saying it was cooked inside the prison with people who are outside the prison. and they decided to go against the rapid support forces, who is refusing to allow them to go back to power on the back of the army. So he is involved. We don't know where he is now, because all of them were released by the army when they started this war. Not only them, they released more than 75,000 criminals from different prisons who are creating chaos in every city in Sudan now. And that is the situation. He is involved.
Are there outside role players, other countries with vested interests that are supporting either side and fueling the conflict?
Certainly, yes. There are so many hands in this Sudanese conflict. Hands that are supporting government and hands that are supporting the RSF. Personally, I don't have any proof except that the deputy of the Burhan said last week that they have signed an agreement with Russia, and Russia have already given them 7 military airplanes that have now entered the war, and they are killing the rapid support forces. So there is definitely international hands in this conflict. At least Russia is one, Iran is one supporting the government, and there is a lot of talk about the Emirates, United Arab Emirates supporting the RSF.
So what is it that Sudan has in terms of natural resources or otherwise that makes the international players interested in what's happening in Sudan?
I want to tell you something, and don't quote me. You see, Sudan was occupied by the Turks in 1821 by Muhammad Ali Pasha. And Muhammad Ali Pasha said, I am going to conquer Sudan looking for 2 things. Looking for gold and looking for strong men who can fight. Because the Sudanese are very known for being very strong and very brave in wars. People want of Sudan 2 things. Let me be very frank with you. The Sudanese under Umar al-Bashir have more than, some people said, almost 60,000 fighting the war in Yemen on behalf or together with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So this is 1. 2, Egypt have used the Sudanese army in all their fights against the Israelis since 1956. So they wanted a Sudanese army that can take some of the heat of wars from them. This is 1 thing. The second thing are the resources. Sudan has a lot of unused agricultural land and a lot of water that is not being used by the Sudanese. And people wanted to have a hand in this, but we always say, brothers, you can always have it. There is no need for a fight. You can come and invest and produce. Our lands are there for you to come and invest in it. But it seems people don't want to come and invest. They want you to take things by force. And this is what is making the Sudanese unhappy and bringing a lot of misery into Sudanese life.
Now, in terms of why mediation efforts, both in terms of the continent as well as internationally, haven't yet produced the desired results, what's your assessment of it? What role did the AU play, for example, or can they play? We know at one stage there were many talks taking place in Saudi Arabia. Now there are talks taking place in Geneva, from what we understand from reports. What seems to be the stumbling block? What's the deal breaker in terms of some sort of a peace deal here or a ceasefire?
Let me be frank with you. In the last 20 years, we have 2 armies in Sudan fighting every Sudanese who says what you are doing is wrong. Since 2018 and the revolution, the second army in Sudan, which is the Rapid Support Forces, at least the leader of the Rapid Support Forces, his name is Hamdan Daglo Himeti. Himeti apologized to the Sudanese nation and said, I am really very sorry, and I ask Allah to forgive me for the atrocities that I have committed. I was wrong. I wanted to correct my wrongs. I am supporting the revolution in Sudan. I will never kill any Sudanese. I will never arrest any Sudanese. I will never allow anyone to arrest or kill any Sudanese. And people were very happy about this. But the The ruling elite were unhappy about this completely, although they are the ones who created the rapid support forces, who gave him the money, who gave him the training, who gave him the stature that he is now standing on. But unfortunately, because he went out of their hands, they started fighting the rapid support force. And this has made them very adamant that they will not accept any answer other than killing every member of the rapid support forces. And this has been said by Burhan, by his 3 deputies, by many of his ministers. All what they say, we are not going to stop the war until we kill the last of the rapid support forces officers. The Sudanese people are not part of this argument. We want the war to stop, and we want both of them to sit and negotiate a peaceful solution to this problem. But to be very frank with you, the Muslim Brotherhood of Sudan, who are behind all this conflict, are the ones who have been aborting every agreement. There were 3 major agreements that have happened to stop the war. That is called Jeddah 1. Jeddah 1, they signed to it, and immediately when they came back, Al-Burhan said, no, I am not following up on what I have done. Then it fell out. Then they had another, which is called Jeddah 2. It also fell down because after he agreed and signed, he came back. The Muslim Brotherhood who are supporting him asked him to not to go, and he stopped it. We have a 3rd one which was very successful. It happened in Bahrain, and in Bahrain, the deputy of Al-Burhan was there, and the Americans were there, the Saudis were there, the Emiratis were there, the Egyptians were there. Those are the main shakers and movers in the war that is happening in Sudan. And they have all agreed to an agreement, and they signed it. But immediately after signing it, Al-Burhan came up and said, no, I am not agreeing to Al-Manama agreement. I am telling you all this is a long story to tell you. The more people of Sudan are looking for peace, the more the previous ruling party is looking for power. And there is conflict between peace and power. They wanted power, we wanted peace. So they wanted to conquer the rebel group that they have created, and we wanted the war to stop so that we can have our normal life. Those are contradicting objectives, and it is very clear there is no answer to it.
Now, how would you describe the current situation between the 2 parties? I mean, are they still equal in strength? Is there a stalemate, or is there signs that one is gaining dominance over the other?
Yes, since the war started, the army has been from failure to failure to failure to failure. They lost all their headquarters in Khartoum and in many other towns in Sudan. The rapid support forces, since the war started, is from getting more and more land and more of the army barracks, and confiscating the army equipment. So everyone knows the army is in decline and the rapid support forces are gaining. We are not happy that anyone gains or anyone loses. We wanted them to sit down and sign a peace agreement. But the way our minds work and the way the military minds work are different. We are unable to convince them that signing peace today is better. I want just to give you a sentence that most of the commentators reiterate again and again. They said immediately after the war in Sudan, after 2 weeks, people asked the army to sign an agreement. The army said, no, I have to kill every rapid support force army officer. After the fall of Khartoum to the rapid support forces, asked them, come to agreement, they said no. After Al-Ubayd fell, Al-Fashir fell, Central Sudan, the main Central Sudan state, which is called Al Jazeera, fell. People said, come on site. Practically, the army is losing and is adamant not to sign an agreement to bring peace. We don't understand how they are thinking.
What role can South Africa play?
South Africa can play three roles. One is already being done, and I want to say to you that I am very proud of it. The first, which is Waqf al-Waqifin. Waqf al-Waqifin have supported the displaced and have supported the refugees. And they are now supporting refugees in Chad. We needed more, and Africa Muslim Agency also. We needed more of the South African humanitarian support to the refugees who are now in Chad, in South Sudan, in Uganda, in Ethiopia, in Egypt, and in many other countries. We wanted, that is one role that the South Africans can play, and they must play as yesterday. The second role is they must get involved, get their hands dirty in this Sudanese politics. You see, the previous president, Thabo Mbeki, have done a lot of work in Sudan, but he has disappeared completely when we are now in trouble. This is really, I'm really unhappy about it. Our previous foreign minister was very vocal about the atrocities in Sudan and was very supportive of the United Nations agreement and the UN and the African Union about Sudan, very supportive of the cause of the Sudanese. And she was always speaking about peace. Let us stop the peace. War will never give us anything. So there is a need for more political engagement from the South African government into the Sudanese politics. The third one is locally here. We, as a Sudanese community in South Africa, are a small community. I wanted to propose to the Sudanese community that we come together and we go to our embassy or we go to the African Parliament and voice our concern. Please, we are for peace. We are not interested in war. Let us stop the peace. Let us go to the negotiation. In case some of this popular work can find a listening ear.
Now, I suppose a big challenge is media coverage or the lack thereof. Globally, other issues are of greater interest to the mainstream media, like Ukraine. Even within the Ummah, there has been, and to an extent, understandably so, a lot of focus on what's happening in Gaza to the detriment of the situation in Sudan.
I agree with you, but you see, when we see our brothers and sisters and children in Gaza, we feel for them. And we say to ourselves, even if we lose and they gain support, we can tolerate it. But you are right. Gaza and the Ukraine have overshadowed the Sudanese problem. To me, the Sudanese problem now is the biggest problem. It's almost 10 times Gaza, to be very frank with you. Gaza has a population of 2 million. Sudanese, we have 10 million who are displaced. Not once, not twice, some of them 3 times displaced. Moving from one town to the other, the war reaches the other town, they move again. At least in Gaza, there is a sort of support, community support. In Sudan, this community support have died away because if you wanted to support someone in need in the army press, the army will be angry with you because it means you are supporting people to tolerate the war. It means you are supporting the rapid support forces. If you are in the rapid support forces and you wanted to say stop the war and help people, they will accuse you that you are being one way or the other working with the army. And this reduced the initiatives, the local initiatives that can help people. It's a very difficult situation.
Talk to us about the humanitarian aspect, right? We're hearing about famine. We're hearing about attacks directly on hospitals. where injured people are further exposed to direct attacks. What's the health situation like on the ground in Sudan?
Those days, whenever we write articles, whenever we speak for the international media in Arabic, we always say this: the people who are lucky were missed by a bullet. Most probably will die of hunger. And this has already started, especially in Darfur, because people have lost 2 agriculture seasons. You see, the majority of Sudanese are rural people. They depend on agriculture. And we have missed the first rainy season of 2023, and now we are missing the second rainy season of 2024. And these people have used all the remaining resources of money or food that has been stored. Every storage is now dwindling. And people in some areas are eating grass. People in some areas are eating some trees, leaves that are palatable. It's a very difficult situation. It's the real famine in Sudan, and it's the real famine for millions of people. Children are already emaciated to the skin and bone.
Is there a glimmer of hope? Are you optimistic about the short to medium term prospects?
Yes, I am optimistic. To be very frank with you, I am really optimistic, because what is happening in Geneva now, there were some people who were supportive of the army rhetoric, that the army is there and it is going to be successful in defeating the rebels. But after more than 18 months, the majority of the Sudanese, I can say 70% of the Sudanese, are convinced that their army is incapable of getting any success. This is one. So there is dwindling support for the army objectives. This is one. What makes me optimistic. 2, the world is unhappy that a country like Sudan, who is capable of feeding itself and feeding others, is not using those resources, and water is being lost and land is being lost, and people wanted normal life to come back to Sudanese so that they can produce. This is something that everyone is wanting it to happen. 3, our neighboring countries that have sheltered the refugees, they thought they will shelter them for 1 month or 2 months. Now in Egypt, people are more than a year in Egypt and in Chad, and they are also using the resources of those countries, and in Ethiopia. And all those countries are now very keen for an agreement to stop the war. The 2 warring parties themselves are tired of fighting, Both of them wanted anyone to come and hold hands. Our problem now is the Muslim Akhwan al-Muslimin in Sudan, who are still not convinced that they are out of power and that they have to stop trying to get power again. They are unhappy about it. So I am optimistic. All those factors are very strong, and they will be stronger than the will of Akhwan al-Muslimin of Sudan, clinging to power. And they will come to an agreement, either with Ikhwan al-Muslimin as part of it, or they are not as part of it. But both situations are good for us.
Inshallah. So the humanitarian efforts, right? You spoke earlier on about Gift of the Givers, the Waqf al-Waqifin, African Muslims Agency. Internationally, we understand that Doctors Without Borders, MSF, are running hospitals. To what extent are both parties allowing humanitarian effort to take place? And what's your assessment of the global contribution via humanitarian aid to what's happening in Sudan?
Let me put it to you this way. The war, from the first 2 months, displaced a minimum of 4 million Sudanese. And the Rapid Support Forces said, we are unhappy about what has happened. Let us bring humanitarian support to those who have displaced. The government said no. Burhan said categorically in more than one instance that I will never allow humanitarian support to go to any areas where the rapid support forces are. This was a big dilemma for the Sudanese because the rapid support forces were successful fighters, and they got more and more land. The whole of West Sudan, five Darfur states, 3 Kordofan states, the whole of the central Sudan is in their hands. Big chunk of the Sudanese land is in their hands, and our government in Port Sudan is unhappy that humanitarian support goes to those areas. This is a big problem that we are having. Hospitals are non-functional for 2 reasons. One of them, they were bombed after by the blind Air Force of the Sudanese Army or by the long-distance fighting from the rapid support forces. Hospitals are destroyed. All the workers of the hospitals are running away from the war. They are now in Egypt, they are in Saudi Arabia, they are in Oman, running away for their lives. So there is no staff, and there is no infrastructure, and there is no medicinal supplies for those people. People are dying now of disease. Just 2 days ago, the Minister of Health in the government of Sudan, in Port Sudan, have declared that hundreds of Sudanese are dying of cholera. It's a big problem. And no one knows how to do it because they have hit the water purification stations. They are not functional. So people are either taking water from wells or from the tributaries of the Nile and unhealthy water and creating more and more problems. It is really a very dire situation. We want the dua of everyone that Allah will guide us to sign a peace agreement like tomorrow.
Well, let's conclude on that, the peace agreement. What would be the key components that peace agreement would need to contain in order for there to be a realistic chance that both parties would sign it?
The American ambassador to Sudan have already spoken about this, and he said they will work on a piecemeal process. They wanted first to stop, to create humanitarian corridors. And when they create humanitarian corridors, this means there will be either army or other tools that will keep the army where they are now and will keep the rapid support forces where they are and allow the trucks and the other support to go to areas that are in need of support. And this means a war the fighting at least will stop for 2 or 3 weeks. And they hope that those 2 or 3 weeks of no bullets might change the minds of the 2 fighting partners, and they see that peace is better for both of them. So we will start with the humanitarian corridors, the distribution of the humanitarian support, which have started already. The government have already opened 3 borders with Chad and Central African Republic and South Sudan that will bring in humanitarian support from those countries into Sudan. We are hoping that they will stop also their fighting planes from throwing bombs at different cities, and that they will allow a humanitarian support to come by planes to areas like Al-Ubaid, Khartoum itself. The airport is functional, but the war is just stopping people from coming there because they are scared they will be shot down. So if they agree to create a sort of a safe skies in Sudan, this will create another opportunity for people to have a better life than they are having today.
Inshallah. Dr. Abdel Karem El Goni, shukran so much for your time and for chatting to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I hope that you get at least every 2 weeks some session with Sudan. I can ask the Sudanese ambassador to speak to you. I can ask other people to speak to you so that we keep the issue of Sudan into the hearts of the South Africans here, and especially we ask of every Muslim to raise hands in tahajjud that Allah guides the Sudanese to sign a peace agreement and reduce the suffering. Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah, Amin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was Dr. Abdel Karem El Goni. He's an activist. He's also with the Sedara Institute, and we're talking about the situation in Sudan. Dire indeed, as you heard him explain. Let's continue to remember the people of Sudan in our du'as as well, inshallah. Until next week, when we see you again here on Debunked, keep us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.